Welcome to the podcast, The Director's Podium. I'm your host, Adam Christie. Today we have a real treat for you. Our guest is one of the most insightful leaders on education today. He's written over 50 fantastic books, including What Great Teachers Do Differently and Shifting the Monkey. He does speaking engagements all over the globe, and he's here with us today to be with you. Ladies and gentlemen, the incomparable, one of my heroes, Mr. Todd Whitaker. Todd, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Adam. The audience needs to know that the introduction's better than I am. So that was really the peak, and it's kind of downhill from this point forward. But I am truly honored to have a chance to be with you and all of your guests.
Todd, tell us a little bit about your leadership journey. What was your first leadership experience, and how did you get from where you were then to where you are now?
Well, I don't even really know exactly where I'm at now, so I don't know about that part of the journey. But as far as formal, would have been, and I'll tell you where. It's kind of funny. I started teaching in a very small town in Missouri, and I was a varsity basketball coach and a math teacher. And I was, fine. I taught on personality, and other teachers had like lesson plans and stuff, which was a huge advantage for them. But anyhow, I got along fine. And it was kind of interesting because I'd have students that I had in class, or players that were on my basketball team, and they'd be sitting down in the office because a teacher sent them to the office, or they'd be in the hallway for punishment. And I remember thinking, if these people can't handle these kids, it must be horrible to be what it is they're doing, because these students aren't even hard. And then I thought, if I could do something to help these teachers become more effective, they would love life so much more, and the students would enjoy school so much more. And so that's how come I decided to take a look and get into formal school leadership.
So did you always feel like you had that leadership ability within you?
I don't know. Maybe I thought I was a leader and I couldn't get anybody to follow me. I don't have any idea. I didn't really ever think like that. I truly don't. I'm an instinctual person, but I don't think, how do I fit in here, or what's going on here? It's just my instinct. And then I had the good fortune. I actually became a principal when I was 25. I was a high school principal, and I was varsity boys and varsity girls basketball coach. And it was because I still enjoyed coaching, but I really wanted to try to get in the principalship. And I happened to find a small school in Northwest Missouri and Hopkins, Missouri, that had the opportunity for principal and basketball coach. And I went up there and ended up also working in football and golf and girls softball. We actually won a state championship in softball. And then they asked me to also coach the girls basketball team at the same time I was principal there. And the school was grades 5 through 12. And I loved it. It was just a tremendous opportunity, and I still am connected to a lot of people in the community, and I'm very, very fortunate. And I just really enjoyed it. And it really was. I got into education. I quit law school to get into education. My undergraduate was business administration, and I got into law school, and I realized that wasn't what I wanted as my peer group. And that sounds terrible, because I'm sure some of your audience members, but it really was. Some people, I thought everybody in law school cared about truth, justice, and the American way. And at least a few of them cared about making $300 an hour with a law firm of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. And that's a joke. That's a Vince Gill joke. But anyhow, but I really realized I wanted to make an impact. And I happened to be dating a girl at the time whose dad was a high school basketball coach in Missouri and was the third winningest coach in high school in Missouri history. And I realized the impact he had, and his wife was an educator, and the impact she had. And that's how come I got into education. And I just wanted to make a difference. And then I wanted to become a principal because I felt like maybe I could even make more of a difference. And eventually I moved into central office and higher education because I kept thinking, how could I try to expand any influence that I might be able to have? And that's why I started writing and speaking and writing articles and all that kind of stuff, is just to try to reach out. Everybody wants to be good. Everybody does, no matter what it is they do. Sometimes we just don't know how. And if somebody teaches us how, we'll do it, because all of us want to be good. Everybody wants to be good.
So I'm wondering if people can change, is it systems that change them or is it people that change people?
I think it's other people. I think you see a better way, you hear a better way, you learn a better way. But more important, people teach it. It's really an interesting thing. I'm primarily in education, but I work with businesses all around the world too. And it's really funny because I've written a couple books for businesses. Shifting the Monkey is one, and a book called The Ball. And one of the things that I try to help people understand is we have to teach people how to get better, not tell people how to get better. We do so much telling, it's unbelievable. My educator friends out there, how many of you have been told to raise your test scores? Okay. Everybody's been told to raise their test scores. I just want to know how many of them have been holding back on that. How many try to keep a little slack in the line and not have their test. Everybody has their test scores up as high as they know how to get them. Because if you could get your test scores higher, you'd get your test scores higher, Adam, because it benefits you. Mm-hmm. Think about this. I do so much I do student management, and with businesses, I do adult management all the time. How do you work? How do you get? All of my books are the same thing, and I know you'll feel blessed if you've ordered two, but what they really are is how do you get people to do what it is you want them to do? That's all I know how to do, and that's all we need to know how to do. Think about if you have children, every parent does the best they know how in raising their children. And if any parent could get their children to behave better, they'd get their children to behave better. I promise, nobody holds back. And so, but if I tell you to get your kids to behave better, you get frustrated. If I taught you to get your kids to behave better, you do it in a second because it benefits you. And that's kind of the way I've always looked at things in terms of leadership. People want to be good. Think about leaders. You don't have a leader that doesn't want to be respected by the people that they are supervising. If they could be more respected, they'd be more respected. They just don't know how. And what happens is we do generalizations. Instead of what happens is, Adam, I've got to teach you how for you to be more effective. I can't just generalize and say, be more positive or be more optimistic, or because you don't know how to, you're already trying to do that to the best degree you know how to do it, in my opinion.
Why do you think it is, or do you think it is, that teachers are over or underestimated as leaders? If you were to say, I'm a leader in the community, that people would think, oh, you're the mayor, or what are you? And as soon as you say you're a teacher, it's like, oh, you're a teacher. Yeah, I guess you're a leader. I mean, we generally, people do not think of teachers as leaders. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because they're familiar with them, and that loses some of the luster. I think when somebody goes, oh, they're the mayor, oh, somebody's a governor, or oh, somebody is a CEO. If you actually worked in that organization, or you were more familiar with the way sometimes things happen politically, you probably would lose some of that luster. But instead, that's something you're unfamiliar with. But instead, I always say everybody's been in a school, so everybody thinks they know how to run one. The number one business that opens in the United States is a restaurant, and the number one business that closes in the United States is a restaurant, because everybody's been in a restaurant, so they assume they could run one. I told somebody the other day, the other day I sat on a toilet, but I don't think I'm a plumber. But somehow or another, people think they've been in schools, and thus they know how to run a school, and they think it would be easy. And so I think it's just familiarity. Everybody thinks being a parent will be easy because everybody's seen parents until you actually are one, and then all of a sudden it's a lot more challenging than you had been predisposed to think of.
So it's familiarity, you think?
I think that's a big part of it. And also, we've been around so many teachers, the fact that we've seen some that are better and some that aren't as good. And so I think that's part of it too. That's just me. And maybe there's some historical gender bias involved in that also. I don't know.
So can all teachers be great teachers?
All teachers can be better. I don't know. I'm writing a book called How to Help All Teachers Become Like the Best Teachers, because that's the only solution. In every school in the world, there's a couple teachers that have cracked the Da Vinci Code. And what happens is we really don't need anything else. We just need all teachers to become like those teachers in their schools. And so all teachers can become better once you teach them. There's zero question about that whatsoever. Can they become great? I don't know. I think that's a different level, but all teachers can definitely become better. No question. So can all leaders.
What would you say has been the most difficult situation that you were in education?
Prior to this podcast, um,
Yeah.
that's a joke. Adam couldn't be nicer. Most difficult situation I've been in, it's having an ineffective supervisor. That's been the most difficult situation I've been in. I've had a situation where I was a principal and I had a superintendent that had no interest in, the superintendent was terrified of everyone. He was terrified of everyone. So if a parent was ever upset, he literally didn't know what to do, and he would do everything he could to reconcile that. I call it short-term pleasure syndrome. That, I can appease, it's like your own children. It's always easier to tell your own child yes than no. It's always easier to tell your child yes than it is to tell them no. And today, this second, that's short-term pleasure syndrome. The child's happier, thus it's easier for you, but it leads to long-term pain. And I've had a couple of supervisors that were kind of like that. They didn't know how to be effective. They were scared of people. They were scared of making decisions. They were scared of people being upset. And so that's it. When you have responsibility and you don't have control, it's a very challenging situation to be in.
It's crazy how if you have a leader that sometimes there's a lot of great principals, but they feel like their hands are handcuffed because of the person above them for whatever reason. What advice would you give to those people that think that I can only do so much? I'm not the top dog.
I think that I try to teach, it's interesting when I do things, there's never position power involved. So I try to teach my supervisor exactly the same as I try to teach the people I supervise. Because you know what my supervisor wants to be? Really good. They want to be good. They don't know how to be good. Some of them don't know how to be good. And if somebody doesn't teach them, it's really kind of a funny thing. The first school where I was principal when I was 25, the principals went to the school board meetings. And you just, there's a very small chain of command and you're at a school board meeting. And I would talk to the principals, the superintendents, the school board members, and we'd be hiring. And they'd go, oh, well, we need to hire this person because they're local. And I'd go, well, if they're local and they're good, of course you should hire them. But if they're local and they're no good, you should never hire them. Because you think, and they'd go, well, people are going to be mad if I don't hire them. I go, how are they going to feel when you fire them? And then they'd go, well, I don't want to tell them that we're not going to hire them. And I'd say, I'll tell them. And they'd let me do it then. Then we wouldn't have to hire them because they were just afraid to tell the people. And I'd go, well, I'll tell the people. It doesn't, I'd much rather tell you no than remediate a dysfunctional person. And people in the community, once they start to know you're making every decision based on what's best for students and that you're not going to cater, they're very comfortable with it. They actually like it. And so it's just kind of a strange thing. But once that they just didn't want to be the bearer of bad news. And so, and I'm always going to be gracious. I'm always going to be kind, but I'm just going to tell the people we can't hire them. And that was what they were most afraid of. They just needed somebody to teach them how. And I used to teach them all the time. I go, when you hire someone local and they're not good, they're never leaving. They are never leaving. So you better hire local people that are really, really good. Because if not, what happens is they're worried about telling this one applicant no. I'm worried about that applicant having 25 kids and being ineffective every year. That's a much more important thing to me.
Yeah. And that has ripple effects across the whole school, of course.
And that's 25 local kids that aren't receiving the education they should have. So we're worried about upsetting one local person when instead we're upsetting 25 families every year if it's a elementary teacher, or 100 kids if it's a secondary teacher. I don't even understand how that's a decision.
What would you say has been your finest moment as a leader? Often your finest moment comes in the toughest times where you rose to the occasion. What would you say has been your finest moment as a leader? Other than this podcast, obviously.
Dang it. I was going to say that, Adam. Now you're ahead of me. Probably kind of turning schools around. That's probably the thing that's most enjoyment. I always say sometimes it's more fun to mow where the grass is long. And I've had a couple of situations where I'm a very unusual person in that I'm one of the few principals I've ever known that would rather deal with a teacher who's wrong than a parent who's right. And we spend a lot of times dealing with parents who are right. And I don't want to do that because we're wrong, but I don't mind dealing with employees that are wrong because we're right, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to defend nonsense. And I was very fortunate. One of my schools that I became principal at the end of my first year, my five least effective teachers were gone. I didn't document any of them. I didn't fire anyone. They chose to leave. And that allowed me to hire 5 outstanding people. And it literally changed the school almost overnight. Because if you can take the 5 least effective people and replace them with 5 of your most effective people, that is an incredible dynamic in any organization. And that I teach people how to do that kind of stuff too. And it's never mean. I always treat a difficult employee as if the whole faculty was watching, because the good people want me to deal with them. They just want me to deal with them in a professional, respectful manner. Just like a teacher in the classroom. The kids want you to deal with a challenging kid. They just want you to deal with them in a professional, respectful manner.
Mm.
And people, believe it or not, this is really strange. People like being told the truth. They just don't like being told it in a way that's rude or disrespectful. And it actually gives you confidence. You know, Adam, if I'm your principal and I'll tell you the truth, you know what's really strange? You have confidence all the time, because if you're doing something wrong, I'll come and talk to you. And I don't mean I'll come and talk to you in a gotcha way, meaning I'll come and talk to you. So look how much confidence that is when you know that I will come and work with you if there's something you're doing that's ineffective.
Right.
And I stroke and value you, and I wouldn't do that if it wasn't sincere also. But that's incredibly, confidence is the most valuable gift we can give. And I think as a leader, we have to do that. My third book was dealing with difficult parents. And because I never want a teacher to call a parent if they don't know what to say. I don't want you to get in a situation where you don't know what to say, where you're uncomfortable, where someone's belittling you. Because then you don't have confidence, and then you're going to be hesitant to call parents in the future. And I don't want that.
Mm.
That was a disservice if you're my employee. If I own a business, I work with business owners all the time. If they don't teach their employees what to say when there's an upset customer, the employees become afraid of the customers.
Right.
And that's no fun. Nobody can like their job.
Right. One of the things that you had mentioned was that you got rid of those 5 teachers. Those 5 teachers left, but you did not document anything. They just left.
I didn't get rid of them. They chose to leave, right.
So was that through conversations you had with them, just frank conversations?
Yes, but what it also is this is really strange. I need my teachers to do 2 things. And I only need you to do these 2 things, but I need you to do them every day. And if you do them every day, I can help you become highly effective. And those 2 things are care and try. I need you to care and try every single day. Think about this, Adam. If you've ever worked with an ineffective teacher and all of a sudden they just started caring and trying every day, wouldn't they improve dramatically?
Oh, yeah.
And if they had a leader who could give them guidance, they'd improve exponentially. But every once in a while, you have people that they do not have an interest in caring, they don't have an interest in caring and trying every day. And we cannot have that in education. And I don't mean it mean. That doesn't mean these are bad people. It doesn't mean it mean. And what I do is we have to determine with people we supervise, we have to determine if they're ignorant or insubordinate. And it's interesting because most people think they're insubordinate and they're almost always ignorant. And I don't mean ignorant that they're unintelligent. I mean unaware of how to do it correctly. Adam, if I come in and I teach you how to manage your classroom, and I come in and I reinforce you and I stroke you and I value and I work with you, and you choose not to do it, Adam, I can't have you in the school. I don't mean it mean. I can't have you in the school. Mm-hmm. But I'm not requiring you to figure it out on your own. I'm going to help. That's what I'm for. But I can't have you not doing things in the best interest of students. I just can't have it. It's not fair to the students. And there's no one who supports teachers more than I do. I just happen to like kids even more than I like the teachers. But no one supports teachers like I do. No one does. No one will support teachers like I will, because teachers they're the core of the school. You know, it's really funny. I went to higher education and I trained people to work with people to become principals and superintendents. And it's interesting because people go, do you miss being a principal? And I go, I miss it like crazy because I love being a principal. And they go, don't you miss the students? And I go, you know what's funny? If I went back now, the students wouldn't be there. Who I miss are the teachers. The teachers are the ones that make everything fun. The teachers are the ones, you have teachers in your school, when you go in their class to observe for 2 minutes informally, you don't want to leave.
Right.
You don't want to leave. But see, if I went back to the school, the students would be gone.
Right.
But the teachers, some of the best teachers would still be there. That's who you miss. It's really a strange thing.
I'm curious about what your response would be to this. I talked to my grandma a lot about teaching. She was a former teacher for many, many years, and she's obviously retired. And she said that teaching is so different now, or even when she left, than when she started, in the sense that when she started, if there was a problem, and this is, 40, 50 years ago, it was always the student's fault. And now it's always the teacher's fault. Do you feel that's true? How would you respond to that?
Well, you put me on the spot because it's your grandmother.
Well, that's okay. I don't agree with her on politics either. So go ahead.
So, I don't agree. Teaching's hard. Teaching's always been hard, and I think it's harder because of test scores, demands, the rules of the game change all the time. But I don't believe that we always look back and think it was a perfect world. We do. We look back and think it was a perfect world. But I have a question for you, Adam. I want you to think back to the best teacher you ever had. Okay, the best teacher you ever had. How would they be now? They'd be great, wouldn't they?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's something about them, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I want us to remember that there's something about those people. And it's so interesting because we hear stuff like innovate. No, I don't care about innovation. I care about effective. You can have a teacher that's incredibly traditional and is incredibly effective. You can have a teacher that's incredibly innovative and incredibly effective. The variable is effective. It isn't innovative. Innovate. So when do we stop innovating? So I have a highly effective teacher. I don't need them to innovate. I need to replicate. That's what I need. I don't want them to do anything different. So in my opinion, they're truly outstanding people. The things that made them outstanding still make them outstanding. Now you can have a situation where you have somebody who's a jerk, and it may have been not your grandmother, but who's a jerk, who's still a jerk. And maybe that jerkiness was tolerated then. Mm. And it isn't tolerated now, but they were still wrong then. It's just nobody stood up to them. When we have situations involving things like now, when you see a situation with and I don't want to get into anything political at all, but you have a situation with a policeman who crosses the line, potentially now because of social media, people know they crossed the line. They crossed the line 30 years ago, that same policeman. However, most policemen don't cross the line. And most policemen didn't used to cross the line, but that was still wrong. It's just 30 years ago, there wasn't videotape. Nobody was recording it. Thus, they could go, well, we were always okay. Well, they weren't okay. It was just that dynamic wasn't there. Now there's less tolerance of someone being ineffective and being inappropriate than there used to be. But I don't believe, when people think about, parents don't have any discipline. Adam, you're younger than me. When you went to school, you had kids that were out of control, that were your classmates, didn't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you know what? I'm really old. And your grandmother is probably about my age, which is sad. But what's interesting is when we were in school, we had kids that parents didn't take advantage of them either. And now we think it's parenting nowadays. No, it's just there's a few dysfunctional people. And there's always been a few dysfunctional people. But the best teachers then could teach right now.
Right.
They could teach right now and be effective because there's something about them. That's my opinion. It's funny. One of the things I start off with when I present a lot is I'll talk about a poor lecturer's classroom. And I go, has anybody ever been in a poor lecturer's classroom? And of course, every hand goes up. And I said, when I say poor lecturer's classroom, which of those three words is the problem? And I'm going to eliminate the word classroom. And everyone says lecture. And I go, nope, the problem's poor. The problem's they're no good at it. The best teacher in a school may still use lecture, and you know what they are? Really good at it. And the worst teacher in a school, Adam, uses lecture, and you know what they are? No good at it. The problem isn't lecture. The problem is whether or not they're effective. And we get confused because we think we need to get rid of a lecture. No, we need to get rid of ineffective.
So let's dream a little bit. I know if one of the things that runs through my mind, I'm sure it runs through the listeners' minds, is how do we get this guy to be the head of the Department of Education for the United States of America? I think that would be the greatest thing they could do. If that was potentially your job, they threw you in January 20th to do just that. What would be your strategy to fix education in the United States?
First of all, I don't think we need to fix education.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are schools that need improving. I think there are districts that need improving. I think there are teachers that need improving. I think there are superintendents that need improving. I think there are state departments that need improving. But I don't blanket monkey. I wrote a book for business called Shifting the Monkey. Blanket monkey means instead of dealing with the 3 districts we need to deal with, we make changes for everything in the state. We do this all the time. I think it comes down to, how do we get more effective people? How do we get more effective people in every position? The biggest disadvantage we have in education is exactly the same that every business has. There aren't enough really good people. And we have to recruit better people. We have to teach people how to be better. People want to be good, Adam, especially educators. They want to be good. And I think it's teaching superintendents how to be more effective. I think it's teaching principals how to be more effective. But it isn't, what it is we have to teach the principals so they can teach their teachers. As a principal, see the difference between great principals and average principals? Average principals think they're still teaching the students. Great principals know they're teaching the teachers. I think that's what it is. Sure, we need more funding. I'm never making light of that. But the reason I don't focus on that is potentially that's out of your control. The other thing is, in a school district, every teacher gets paid the same. They have the same salary schedule. Some of them are effective, some of them are ineffective. That's not the variable. However, I want to increase pay so I can draw a larger pool of candidates. If I have a situation where I have 3 times as many people applying, then I have 3 times more likely to get someone more effective. And then we can also keep them in education because they're so special. But what's interesting is people don't usually leave for $3,000. They usually leave because their boss isn't any good. Mm. And so if we can help every educational leader be effective, I think that increases the satisfaction of teachers. So that's where we always want to start. I don't think it's blowing up the system. I don't believe that, because there's highly effective teachers, highly effective principals, highly effective superintendents, highly effective school districts. We just don't have enough of each of those.
How has teaching changed for you with COVID?
Well, I won't go near people if they don't wear masks. What's interesting is you're gonna laugh at this. I don't think anything's different. I mean, sure, it's not you don't have that personal connection, and I like it if I can meet people. In Indiana, though, for years I taught on television. Believe it or not, they had statewide television, and so it was virtual then. And one of the reasons I liked it is because my dream was to become a game show host, and that never worked out. So this was as close as I could have it. But here's the thing I think that's so interesting. And Adam, I want you to think about this, and you can think that you're in a school, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you go virtual kind of overnight in March?
Yes.
Did your school kind of just, okay. I got a question for you, Adam. Could you name 3 teachers in your school that when you found out literally overnight we're going virtual, could you name 3 teachers in your school that you knew were going to figure it out?
Yes.
Could you name 3 teachers in your school that you knew weren't going to figure it out?
I had my suspicions.
It isn't that different, is it?
No.
I'm not trying to be, no. What makes them effective isn't different. The challenge is, I think, is that many teachers are teaching in person, but part of their class is virtual. And we don't, it's an unknown. Are we going to be hybrid next week? Are we going to be virtual next week? Or are we going to be in person? What about masking? What about social distancing? That is incredibly stressful. But the skills that make people successful are the same skills. It's funny. I've worked with so many groups virtually over the last 8 months or so. And what's interesting is, here's the way the great people always think. They think different than everybody else does. Let's pretend, Adam, you went virtual overnight and you have 25 kids in your class and you only have 14 showing up. Okay. You're virtual and you only have 14 showing up. Do you know your first goal, Adam, is to make sure it never gets to 13? That's your first goal. And if you're highly effective with those 14, what are your chances of keeping 14? Pretty good, aren't they?
Yeah.
And you know what? If you're effective with those 14, do you know what? You have 14 salespeople. And you know what they're telling their buddies? This class is actually worth tuning into. The other classes aren't, but this class is actually worth tuning into. And that doesn't mean you give up on the other 11 that are missing. But what happens is many people focus and talk about the 11 that are missing at the expense of the 14 that are there. People always go, Todd, well, isn't that preaching to the choir? I go, you better preach to the choir or they stop coming to church too. And what's going to be easier, Adam? Making a difference with 14 that are there or making a difference with the 11 that aren't? And look at how much time and energy we put into the 11 who aren't. Look how much time, it's really interesting. My last school I had 1,350 middle school kids where I was principal. And you know how come I could be in classrooms every single day? Because you know what I decided as a principal and I talked to my 2 assistants about? The kid who gets sent to the office is the least important student in the school. Let's quit making them out to be the most important student in the school. And that doesn't mean I'm not gonna have standards for them like no other principal's going to. Nobody's going to support. But why am I in a hurry, Adam? Why am I in a hurry to deal with that kid in the office? Can't that kid just sit there? Is there a teacher in the school in a hurry to get the kid back? And instead, what we do, I spend time with my 1,349 kids doing right instead of the one doing wrong. I'm not in a hurry, but everybody else spends time with the one doing wrong at the expense of the 1,349 doing right. In a great teacher's classroom, when a kid misbehaves, do you know what the great teacher does? They do something called keep teaching. Because you know what they decided? The kid who misbehaved is the least important kid in the class. I'm going to quit making him out to be the most important kid in the class. Because when you keep teaching, you get a chance to keep thinking. And you're thinking, what should I do? Should I send a kid to the office? Should I use, should I give them the eye? Should I redirect? Should I call their name? Should I use proximity? What should I do? I don't have to outquick a kid. And instead, we spend so much time trying to outquick people. Plus, if your secretary's any good, they can deal with 3 dysfunctional kids better than the 3 worst teachers in the school can deal with the 3 dysfunctional kids. But I never think, it's the same way in my school. And the number one belief I teach leaders all the time, if you make every decision based on your best people, you'll never make a wrong decision. Because do you know what your best teachers, Adam, you know what they have? They have a whole school vision, don't they?
Yeah.
The best teachers want every teacher to be successful. They want every kid to be successful. And you know who else they want to be successful? The principal. And in a typical school, there's a lot of people that don't want the principal to always be successful. But the best people always want them to be successful because they know if the principal isn't successful, the kids can't be as successful. And you have to understand that. Instead, what happens, look at the time and energy. Think about this. Have you ever had a faculty meeting, Adam, where a principal talked to all the teachers about one teacher doing something wrong?
Absolutely.
You ever had a principal go, sometimes some of the teachers are coming late, sometimes some of you are coming late, sometimes some of you, who's upset? The good people. And you know what the good people are thinking? What are you talking to me for? Why don't you talk to her? She's not even here yet. And look at how much we do that. And that's what we do. That's called a blanket monkey. And you know why we do that? Because we're afraid of the person who's dysfunctional. We're afraid we're going to upset them. And you know what we have to realize? They're upset anyhow. You know who I'm worried about upsetting? The 30 good people. You know who most people are afraid of upsetting? The one person who's already upset.
Yeah.
I don't get it. And I'm not trying to upset the one person. I'll never humiliate the kid down in the office, and nobody will support teachers like me. But why am I in a hurry? Why am I making decisions based on the kid who's intentionally misbehaving? Why am I making decisions based on the teacher who's not caring and trying? I'm making decisions on look how many people, you know what think about this, Adam, in our country, how many teachers do we have that really care? A lot. Why do we berate and belittle education? Why do we do that? We have a whole bunch of superintendents that care a lot. And we have a whole bunch of principals that care a lot. And we have some that don't. But I've got to determine with the ones that aren't, are they ignorant or insubordinate? And I've got to teach them how better. Do you know why state departments tell schools to improve instead of teaching them? Because they don't know how. Because if they know, if in Montana, if they knew how to get a school district to improve, what would the State Department do, Adam? They'd get the school district to improve because it'd make them look good. And what happens is many times we don't have effective enough people at high enough positions to be able to teach other people how to be effective. And you have to start there.
I asked my superintendent today and principal, but this one is particularly for my superintendent. And I think it's a good one to close this part of the podcast with. I said, if you could ask, say if there was a person that knew everything there is to know, had all the right words to say about being a superintendent or being a leader or an administrator, what's one question you would ask them? Because I knew I was talking to that person. And they said he thought about it and he goes, is it worth it? And I think that's because, you know, he's been dealing with COVID. That seems like it's all he's dealing with. And he doesn't get the chance to interact with the students or the teachers or the staff. Is it worth it? And, you know, when we talk to you, oh, that fire just goes in us like crazy. But could you go ahead and answer that question? Is it worth it?
You know, what's interesting, Adam, the reason I got into education because I wanted to make a difference. And there's a lot of jobs that don't matter. I'm not being mean and I'm not putting other jobs down because I'm glad other people are doing them. I'm glad there's a bunch of people doing the jobs that don't really matter. Because you know what we need to leave? We need the jobs that matter, like in education, to the people who want to make a difference. Because there's a bunch of people who don't want to make a difference, and that's okay. I'm glad they're doing it. I'm glad there's other people doing those things because I don't want to do those things because I want to make a difference. What I want to know is interesting. When you're effective at what you're doing, you know it matters. You know it makes a difference. I always say the best thing about teaching, the best thing about being a principal, the best thing about being a superintendent, it matters. Do you know the hardest thing about those jobs? They matter every day. That's the hardest thing, is they matter every day. I also think we get confused about stuff. You know, it's so interesting, this COVID and the political divide we have, and over masking. Jiminy Christmas, how is there a debate about masking? But you know what I do? You mentioned your grandma. I'm going to tell you about my mom. My mom's 96 years old. My mom doesn't take any medicine. My mom's dating a guy 97. She totally has it made, let me tell you. My mom doesn't take any medicine. She doesn't wear glasses. She's a freak of nature 96-year-old. But do you know what's interesting? Do you know why I ask people to wear a mask, Adam? I do it for my mom. But you know how come I ask you to do it for my mom? I don't ask you to do it for her health, because you're going to argue with me and say, they don't matter, masks don't matter. You know why I ask you to wear a mask? So my mom doesn't feel funny when she wears a mask. That's it. My mom's 90, she shouldn't feel funny anymore, but we're all 13 and hard, aren't we? Do you know, I've gone into stores, Adam, where I pull up at a store, my mom's with me, and my mom goes, Todd, are they going to be wearing masks in there? I don't want to be the only one wearing a mask. Adam, I go into stores and you know what I say? I'm bringing my mom in. She's 96. She just asked me, is everybody in here going to be wearing a mask? I don't want to bring her in here if everybody's not wearing a mask because I don't want her to feel funny. And I understand we'll just go to another store if you want us to. But see, I just don't want her to feel funny. She's 96. She doesn't deserve to feel funny. You know, Adam, I've never had anybody question it. I've had a few people that didn't wear masks leave the store. But see, what happens is that's emotion. Do you know what your superintendent has a chance to do every day? Make a difference. So you tell me if it's worth it. And you ask your superintendent if it's worth it. Because there's lots of jobs that don't make a difference. He happens to choose one that does. This COVID is no fun, but the COVID's temporary. The kids are permanent. And we know it. And if there aren't people like him leading in proper ways, we don't have a chance. And so I guess that's what you can tell him. And I also want to thank him for doing what he does.